Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live on this beautiful Sunday afternoon.
Yes, welcome to Sisters in Company. I am Sherelle Higgins, your favorite co-host of this show.
I set myself up for that every time, but that's okay. I'll let her have it. You know, the babies in the family, they got to be special, and that's okay. I am Dr. Sharon Cradle, and I am the oldest of this dynamic duo.
Yes, she is. I'll let you have that one.
Yes. And so today is going to be a fabulous show. We are so happy that you have decided to join us and spend some time with us this afternoon. As a reminder, please, if you're not on listenvisionlive.com, we're asking you to really to just go out there on the internet, sign into listenvisionlive.com so that you can see the show in its entirety. We thank you, our social media followers. You all have been constant, and we really appreciate it. So you can still send questions via social media. You can call us today at 833-202-8255 to ask us any questions related to the topics. So, Sherelle, you ready to get started?
Oh, you know, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Let me tell you what's so funny about that. Today, I was at church, and I didn't know that I was going to be speaking. And so when they motioned me to come forward, I said to myself, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So I'm not sure what I said, but I know I said
you looked ready.
Yeah, so I love that.
So that's good.
Yes. In today's show, I'm going to start out with scripture, of course, and this really is really related to us as well as the guest that we're going to have here today. The scripture today is Ephesians 2:10, and it reads, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." And the reason I selected that scripture today is the gentleman that's here today. He's just such an awesome human being. He has many talents, and we hear so much negativity about our men, about our community, and we're just here to kind of disrupt the negativity and bring you some people who are doing things in the community, and they're using their gifts and talents that God has given them on this earth while they are still here.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to having him join us because, as Sharon said, the media, they portray our black men in such negative ways that, we act surprised when we find somebody who's doing something positive. And so we're going to flip the script on that. And we're going to make sure that we present to you week after week not only positive black men, but positive black women.
Exactly.
Because contrary to what they want us to believe, our community can and will do better.
And we already are. We were born for this, and we are gifted and talented. And I sometimes believe that because we are so gifted and talented that the narrative has to be negative because we are doing the doggone thing. And that's just how I feel about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And in every community, there are challenges. But I just refuse to be privy to that type of conversation without showing the other side of it.
Yes.
And so Sherelle was not here last week. We had the wonderful Dr. Yolanda as the co-host. And let's give her a round of applause because she really came in, and it was just natural for her. And she did such a wonderful job. So, Dr. Yolanda, I know you're listening from somewhere, and we just want to thank you again for sitting in on behalf of Sherelle last week.
Yes, thank you. And last week I was in Chicago.
Girl.
When we start talking about gifted and talented, let me tell you what's gifted and talented. The people of Chicago are gifted and
Yes,
talented.
they are.
Anytime you can start out kicking it at 5 o'clock in the morning and you don't end till 5 o'clock the next morning and you back up at 7 ready to start it over, that's some talent. The first night I had to call it quits. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and lay down. And they know when I say I'll be right back, I'm not coming back. And so I had to just shut it down and get some sleep. But the reason I went to Chicago is because I attended 2 high schools coming up in my high school years. One high school was Paul Robeson, and the other one was Hyde Park Career Academy.
Yes.
And I went to Paul Robeson my freshman and sophomore year, and just a small part of my junior year before I transferred. But I tell you that Bushtel and Gwen know how to bring the alumni out and bring them together. Mm-hmm. People actually travel from across the waters to come to the tailgate party. Mm-hmm. That Robeson alumni have against Julian alumni. And this year was particularly important because the city of Chicago, the mayor, decided that he was going to tear down and rebuild a lot of schools that are in the inner city. Now, I feel I'm kind of torn because on the one hand, I understand, that the kids are not in those communities are not attending school. And so we had this building that was running up electricity and water and not necessarily the safest place for the kids in the community. But the building was practically empty because the attendance was so low. And so because of that, he decided that he was going to tear down some of these schools and rebuild them and make them high-tech schools. And so, on the other hand, that's a great thing because, our kids are going to get exposed to technology and get exposed to living a better life. However, the kids in the community are not automatic enrollees into this high-tech school. Right. The kids in the community who wants to go to this school are not automatic enrollees. Right. And so it's a lottery system, and they have to come up with a way to, you have to be special, so to speak, to go to this school. And so where does that leave the kids in the community? In a bad place is where it leaves them. However, this particular tailgate, because of that factor, Paul Robeson was a fairly young school in the lifespan of a school because it was built, I want to say like in the early 80s.
Yes. And
so it was less than, 60 years old, which is young for a school, considering that the school next door to Paul Robeson was Parker High School, and my parents went there, and that school is still standing. And so,
are people still enrolled at Parker High School? Or they're using it for some other...
I'm not really sure, but when we went there, we used both buildings for classes.
Right.
So I'm not really sure what they're doing with that building now, but it's still standing, and I don't know how much longer that's going to be. And so just getting together with my fellow Robeson alumni graduates it's always a good time to be had. We have a resident DJ, Brian Furious, is the DJ, and he throws down, and it is just such a good thing that it started out being a rivalry with Julian. Yes. And it ended up being a family coming together and just really enjoying each other. And although this year Julian was actually playing another school because Robeson is officially closed, they invited the Robeson alumni to come and tailgate as well, as our kind of sort of last hurrah. However, because Chicago people know how to party, they're not going to make it the last hurrah. It's only the last of that hurrah. We certainly plan to have another event in cookout tailgate next year, the same weekend, and just in a different location.
So that's really interesting what Sherelle is talking about, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart. And when we talk about information and education, it is so very important for us to understand how schools work. And so that is not the show for today, but we really are going to come back and have a conversation about school funding, building schools, based on a certain capacity, talking about school choice, one of the things Sherelle is talking about. And so we will definitely have that conversation later on because it's so very important. And when our kids are not in the neighborhood and in the communities, and even if they're in the communities, they're not attending the school, it's a waste of resources. And that's how school boards and state look at that particular type of issue.
And so, it was actually really good. When I was at Paul Robeson, I was a cheerleader, and we also had pom pom girls, and when we often performed together, and it was just so good to see, my fellow cheerleaders and pom pom girls in person. Of course, we're all connected on social media, but to just go and hang out, I knew that there was nothing going to stand in my way to get there and just kind of hang out with Edwana and Nyla and Eileen and Lisa, and we just it's like these 40 years never happened in between the time we went to school together and today. And so that's like, to me, just amazing that we stay connected like that.
Yes.
And so I've been blessed that I happen to have two sets of families outside of my biological family that stay connected, and that's my Paul Robeson Raider family and my Virginia State University Trojans family. And so I'm living my best life.
Yes, exactly. I love it. And while Sherelle was gone, and I guess you came back during the week to go back to work, but we all are aware that Aretha Franklin's funeral was held on Friday, I believe it was. And for those of you that have watched it, those of you that are following the storylines and the memes, I do have to say that some of the memes were quite hilarious. But it was an event to commemorate her life and her life works and what she did while she was on this earth. And again, that's what Ephesians 2:10 is talking about. We are God's handiwork, and we are used. He created us for such a time as this. So all the things that we do, that we know, He prepared in advance. He knew in advance that we would do this because He created us. And so Aretha Franklin was no different. And so, of course, we know that there are some controversies going on, and I don't know enough about them that I don't even really want to talk about it. But the thing I was telling a friend last night is that it was a long funeral to me, something I've never, witnessed before in the black church. But, I go to a black church, so I do know that some services can be long, but I've never been to one that long. And as a result of that conversation, she and I were talking about, we need to plan our funerals. Because, when you leave it to people do the best they can, and they want to honor you. They want to show how much you were loved and show how much you've done. But at the same time, we do have an option, to be able to participate in that particular effort. And so that's really all I'm going to say about it, other than, it was long, and that we have an opportunity to plan our funerals. If we want it to be a certain way, write it down, seal it, give it to someone so that they will know what your wishes are. And this particular friend, she was saying last night, she's going to give away one of her famous recipes, and I'm not going to even talk about which recipe it is. And so that everybody can have a taste if she precedes us in death. So,
well, I want a 6-hour funeral.
Okay.
That's my last hurrah. I want a 6-hour party happening all around the casket.
Party over here, ain't nothing over there.
All night long. What? So get your dancing shoes on. When you hear that I've been called home with the Lord, just know you about to get it in. Let me just read this comment. Jackie said that Parker is a landmark, so they can't tear it down.
Okay,
so
good.
the Parker High School structure will continue to be there.
And we already have a caller, so let me see if we can get the caller. I want to make sure my volume is up because I turned it down for the other show.
I also want to give a shout out to Tonya from Robeson Raiders.
Hello, caller. Are you there? Welcome to Sisters in Company. Okay, we're going to try that again. The phone is plugged in. We have everything set, so I'm not sure what the challenge is. But anyway, and so, again, I know many of you have heard about Kanye West and some of the controversial statements that he has made. And again, I am not here to talk about Kanye West, but what I am here to talk about is, when we are leaders and we lead an industry, and I don't care if it's music, if it's at your job, if it's in the military, we have to be responsible with what we say, because leadership really is just about influence. And if you don't understand that, then you're missing, to me, the purpose of leadership is about influence. So you can choose to influence in a negative way, or you can choose to influence in a positive way. And I heard a clip of something that Kanye said that made me go out and research it so I can listen to the entire interview. And what he was in Chicago, actually, his hometown, on a radio station, and they were just talking to him, asking him about some of the things he had said in the past. And one of the things that he said that struck me was that he doesn't read. He doesn't get his information from reading. He gets his information from the Spirit. Now, as an educator, I'm thinking, wow, I don't even know if he understood the magnitude of what he said or if he really meant exactly what he said. But from my perspective, let me just tell you something. Everyone that follows him, our young children, our young adults, you need to learn how to read. You need to read for yourself, because if you're not reading, and if you're not reading well, you're not going to do necessarily as well in this life, and it's going to be tough. We see it over and over and over again. And so I've just learned, and I'm still there, still learning to watch what I say, because when you say things, it is going to have an impact. Now, if you meant for it to have that impact, then okay, say it. But I'm not so sure if that's what he really meant. And I just wanted to make sure that our people understand you need to know how to read.
I'm going to put a flip on that, because I'm going to put it on the parents. Parents, you need to make sure your kids know how to read. You need to start reading them early. The minute they start talking and they can tell you no, that means that they have some level of intelligence that you can start teaching them how to spell the word no. And so you got to start early. You know, by the time Tasia and Jalen were 5, they were reading. And so kids are a lot smarter than they used to be. And so a lot of kids have the capacity to read early. Parents, make sure your kids know how to read. Don't leave it up to the school system to do it, because it's not their responsibility. It is your responsibility. As a parent, I will tell you, if your kids cannot read, you must be planning to take care of them the rest of your life. And then what happens to them when you are called home? They are at this point an adult, and they don't know how to figure out life because they're missing a basic skill. Reading is required. It is necessary. So parents, make sure your kids know how to read.
Exactly. Know how to read and know how to do some basic things to take care of themselves.
Reading, writing, and arithmetic.
And that's why I wanted to kind of talk about it only for that particular point. And it really leads us into our guest today.
Hold on. Before we go into our guest, we must also honor John McCain.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness, yes.
Hats off to an American hero who was a prisoner of war. He was a longtime senator, and, thank God for John McCain coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning and doing a thumbs down and making sure that those people who need Obamacare, as they like to call it, the Affordable Care Act, that they have it. So kudos to John McCain, and, our condolences to his family.
Yes, and if you did not hear his daughter's speech yesterday, her tribute to her father, she was fire. She was fire, and they have messed with the wrong family. I can tell you that. You know who they are. They messed with the wrong family. And so she was just so passionate. It was heartfelt, and it was just the truth about who her father was. And the thing that she said that stood out to me was her father was defined by love. And so love was what he was about. That's what he tried to demonstrate. And he wasn't a perfect man, but he was defined by love. And so, yes, condolences to the McCain family. And regardless of politics, he was a human being. And he did what he felt was the right thing to do at the time that he was doing it. So, and the other memorable thing about him, and most people I think are starting to understand this, is that John McCain stood up for President Obama during the campaign when they were running against each other. Yes. When the lady kept saying that he was an Arab or whatever she said, and he was like, no ma'am, and got her straight. And wouldn't that just be so awesome if that's what we all do?
Yes.
We all just stand up for one another when people are saying things that are just not right. Just stand up for each other and correct people, because people, again, take snippets of information and they haven't done their own homework, they haven't read through it, and they just run with it as if it is the the end of the story, and that's what it is. And so there's always many sides to a story, many perspectives, and there's always a lot more information that you can add to the story. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so we're going to take a break shortly, but again, talking about Kanye, what he said is really important as it pertains to our next guest, and the Ephesians 2:10, the scripture. God prepared in advance for this man to do some of the things that this man does. And I wanted him on the show because I just believe that we are supposed to live life to the fullest, as my sister already said. Live life to the fullest, and God gives us many gifts and talents. And when I hear people say, particularly at the job, they're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do when I retire. I'm like, wow, what are your gifts and talents? There's so much more to life than just going to a job and working. You have some gifts and you have some talents. And so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to introduce this gentleman, and we're going to have a conversation about the man behind the many gifts and talents. So see you shortly. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle, and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3:00 p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle, and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for hanging in there with us. And our phone system is working now, so you can call back and participate in the show. We really appreciate you. Again, I am so excited to have this gentleman here, Frank Phillips. Frank Phillips, of course, he has so many gifts and talents. And again, we invited Frank on the show because our black men are awesome. They're all that, right?
Yes, they are.
And so we're going to make sure that we pump them up and celebrate them. And so, Frank, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming. Yes, exactly. And so I'm going to let Frank introduce himself. Tell us where you're from. How did you end up in Maryland? And then we're going to talk about the many gifts and talents that you have.
Well, if I was to speak about where I'm from Harlem.
Yes.
And, as you know, Harlem it's noted for the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes.
And we had a lot of people transitioning from the South during the Great Migration, and then they brought a lot of talents, a lot of adversity.
Right.
And out of that adversity, the necessity grew some passion, and we came up with some of our great artists and some of our greatest musicians. So I come from that particular tradition.
Yes.
From that particular situation, I had a very unique pathway. My mother had a nervous breakdown when I was 5 years old, and we were taken away from my mother, and I was raised in a Catholic convent. It taught me a lot of things, and a lot of people look at it and say, wow, man, that's really tragic. No, it actually wasn't. It was actually very good. Out of adversity, out of any kind of adversity that we face, we have an opportunity, and that opportunity will lead us toward whatever greatness we want to pursue. What that taught me is that because I was there alone, and I was there with some other young men and women who were being raised by these Dominican nuns, it taught me in a way that I was responsible for my life from that point. At 5 years old, I knew of that responsibility. So that gave me an edge. It gave me an edge because I never worried about other people taking on the challenges and responsibilities that I had. I depended on myself. And that helped me out quite a bit. I had someone ask me, why are you so passionate? Why you do so many different types of things? Well, the reason for that is, as I said, adversity mixed with necessity breeds passion.
I like that.
I like that too.
I like that. Let's say that again, Frank. I like
Make
that.
sure you talk
Adversity.
directly in the mic.
Meeting with necessity breeds passion.
Yes.
And if you look at many of the things that I do, I operate with a certain level of passion. I have passion for things that I do in my life. I have passion for the people that I engage. And definitely every sport that I engage, most of my friends growing up, even when I came into the military in 1975, they would often say, Frank, you're the only guy we know that will take a book and become an expert in something.
Yes.
So
Isn't that what we were talking about?
Right back to that reading
And,
thing.
and you could not have become the expert if you didn't know how to
Yes,
read. And so
right,
that
yes,
was my
yes.
whole point about bringing that up. So thank you
And-
for confirming that.
And I'll tell you, once we left Harlem, I left the convent in 1968. My father remarried, and he was able to come to get us, and we moved into the South Bronx, into Boogie Down Bronx.
Yes.
Now, you have to imagine that I grew up in a Catholic convent,
Yes.
so I spoke a certain way.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I comported myself a certain way.
Yes.
You were actually using proper grammar?
I even cursed articulately.
Yes.
And, coming from that kind of environment, as a lot of young men, we were all in great shape. And so I moved into the inner city. And we had some pretty tough guys in the inner city. Mm-hmm. But there were no comparison for the convent boys who ate well and we exercised often.
Oh, wow.
So I initially, when you go through that kind of situation, you always go astray initially. So I had to readjust psychologically, to get back on track. So I hung with a different type of young man. They were headed for a different direction. One of my friends who eventually became, unfortunately, a notorious drug dealer, and he spoke to me years later and asked me, when we were 15, I separated from that bad group and went with the group that were a little bit more intellectual. He said, Frank, how did you know how to transition? And I told him, well, I'll just use a fake name. Well, Mike.
Yes.
Whether you were heading down the wrong path or not, you had an infrastructure of family.
Right.
I didn't have that. I knew at an early age that if someone was going to make something happen, it had to be me. And I couldn't afford playing around here because I wasn't suited for jail.
Right. Exactly.
I'm with you on that,
Yes,
Frank.
Frank,
I'm not
yes.
suited for jail either.
Especially when I say, good morning, guys.
Yes. That's right.
But the only thing that saved me is that I could fight better than the rest of them.
Okay.
Woo, good thing.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I grew up around 150 healthy young men.
Yeah.
So I joined the Army. My father had a fourth grade education. He would always joke and say that he was in the fourth grade so long he dated a fourth grade teacher. And I thought that was a lie, but that was actually the truth.
Oh, wow.
My father couldn't read nor write. So
Wow.
because of that education that I received from the convent, it actually put me in good stead. I didn't learn anything in public school, but everything that I'd learned in the convent prepared me.
Yes.
I met a lot of people in the neighborhood that drew to me, and they served as a surrogate family for me, constantly uplifting me, telling me things that they would see, and that forced me to go in a certain direction. So I got accepted in some of the universities in town just based on, did well on the SATs, and I was a thug, initially. I got in, and unfortunately, I didn't fill out the paperwork. I got into St. John's, went to the to the auditorium, the cafeterias in 1975, and I was so embarrassed that I joined the Army.
Oh, interesting.
So I joined the Army, and the first thing that happened to me, I got down to Savannah, Georgia. I'm from New York. I'm an articulate New Yorker, you know. And I'm used to dealing with all kinds of people. You showed a picture of me as a little boy with a bunch of different people. I grew up with these guys. It wasn't white, black, whatever. They were my brothers. We lived together. So that's all I knew. So when I got there, I had a situation that approached me, and they called me up to the police station and said that I hit some guy. Well, really what it was some other thing that occurred. And I challenged it. I said, look, I'm not taking another 15 for something I didn't do. Let's go to court. And a lot of the brothers during that time, they would say, Brother Phillips, take the Article 15, man. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm a Catholic convent guy. So I said, no, I'm going for righteousness and justice.
That's right. Yes.
That was a wrong decision. I got into the court, and they found me guilty. And sentenced me to 6-month hard labor in Leavenworth.
Wow.
I spent about 30 days in solitary confinement. I was claustrophobic. I remember hearing about Malcolm X. I remember reading that growing up in the inner city. That was one of our heroes. And I remember the things that he did. I remember grabbing onto the bars. They had me in this place that was 3 wings. There was only 3 prisoners in the whole wing. It was a military prison before I transitioned to Leavenworth. And they had a martial artist that killed somebody in one wing, and they had a guy who was making bombs. He was in Vietnam. This was Vietnam era. And then they had me in a separate wing to myself. And I'm in this 6x8 cell, and I'm thinking I'm about to break down. I grab onto the bars, and I remember saying to myself, let the bars go. I said, if you do anything here, you're done.
Right, exactly.
So I readjusted myself. I asked for some books to read. I started doing push-ups every day and got my mind focused. When I came out of, they allowed me to get out of prison early because the warden evidently saw that there was something wrong there. But it changed who I was. I went from being just a regular guy who was going to be lackadaisical to someone that was seriously about his business. So I got my AA degree while I was in as an enlisted.
So let me make sure I understand. So you went to Leavenworth, and when you got out, you remained in the military. They let you stay.
I didn't make it to Leavenworth. That was where I was going next.
You
they
were going
processing me at Fort
okay.
Gordon.
Okay.
I was in Fort Gordon. I was so afraid that I begged the guy who was driving me there. They had me in leg irons and shackles. I begged him to give me to send a letter to one of my friends whose mother was an Eastern Star. I knew my father couldn't, so I couldn't communicate. And I begged, I said, please, Miss Miller, if they say I killed myself, it's a lie.
Right.
Because I was that afraid. I didn't know what was going to happen. But it changed the way that I dealt with stuff. So if you see a certain passion and a seriousness about how I do what I do, then it comes from that kind of
kind of thing.
And
that's why I wanted to have you on there, because I've been knowing you for a few years and just been following you. And when I see the awesome things that you're doing, you know, I'm always asking myself, you know, when I meet people, where's that coming from? Because I know it's coming from a deeper place, but not knowing your story, I didn't know that part of your story. So what an awesome story, and thank you for sharing that awesome testimony that leads to some of the things we're going to talk about.
A lot of people who would have been faced with that adversity wouldn't have made it out on the other side. They would have come out and they would have just been so angry and so bitter that, you know, they just would have continued to make bad choices. So kudos to you for using that as a platform to propel yourself to something great.
So when you were released, what happened in the military? So how did you I'm assuming you went to officer candidate school and some other things. Well,
what I did was I was really rebellious when that happened, because of course when you see the system looking at you and telling, you know, I was the worst candidate to do that to, because I'm raised in this convent. It's very idealistic. Your mindset is, you know, how dare you? I'm looking at this guy, he's looking at me like, because of my black skin, I'm supposed to be accepting of this.
Right.
How dare you? You know? And I had to adjust to the reality that was there. And it was a rude awakening. And so I came with a certain fire.
Right.
And when I went to school, it was with a fire. And I rebelled against some of the people there. I remember when I was leaving, one of the sergeants there, Sergeant Timmons, I remember we were at the arms room. And many of the brothers that were in with me weren't as educated during that time. So they gave me the articulate black guy who can write speech too.
Exactly.
So he comes up to me, he says, "Hey, Phillips, you gonna be re-enlisting?" You know, he says that in front of everybody because he wants to make sure he's got everybody squared away. And I said, "No, Sergeant Timmons, I'm going to college." He says, "I'll tell you what, Phillips, you're gonna be in the soup line." I said, "Sergeant Timmons, if you see me again, you're going to see me on TV or you'll be saluting me."
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
by God, I waited for him, and I never ran into him after that.
But that was your motivation.
That was
exactly.
my motivation.
And you talked about something that I just think is just so important. Our mindset.
Yes.
Your mindset, you have to be determined. You have to know who you are.
Yes.
You know, you walked in knowing who you were because of your experience in the convent and coming from New York and Harlem. You knew who you were, and you just were not going to be someone who was going to let someone tell you something different.
Yes.
And so then you went out to prove that.
Yes. When you, I later on, when I went into the military, I later went into infantry. I was an infantry airborne ranger. And a lot of people would often say, "Oh man, Ranger, that's some real tough stuff." And I'd look at them and I said, "That wasn't anything." I said, "You want to talk about tough? Try being a 5-year-old mama's boy and knowing that you'll never see your mother again."
My God.
That's tough.
That's tough.
You know, Ranger school, that was a walk in the park. You know what I'm saying?
That puts it in perspective.
Yes, exactly.
So, you know, and I say that to say, it's almost like the young man who was on Platoon. He said, once you get out of Vietnam, everything's going to be gravy. So once I got out of that experience, everything was basically gravy.
And can you hold on for a second? I want to make sure we take this call. Let's see. Hello, caller. Welcome to Sisters in Company.
Hey, how are you?
We are doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, it's a blessed Sunday. First thing first, you know, it's my first time tuning into the show. And just to give you a heads up, you know, when you're viewing it online, it's about 30 seconds to a minute difference between. So if I miss anything, you know, I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Thanks
but
for
I would
letting us know.
definitely like to say, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you for letting us know. And what's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, my name is Ali Benesmi. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I just wanted to say, you know, I'm really proud of Doc Phillips there. I'm one of his mentees, so I'm just tuning in. One thing I definitely want to say was, you know, about that suit he has on. I would definitely like to borrow it, you know, sometime.
Yes, he is clean.
Very sorry.
Yes, Frank is clean.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment or basically a question or something, you know, I wanted him to be able to elaborate on. One thing I know he always says is that, you know, humans are very unique individuals. And I wanted him to elaborate on, you know, how important it is for young black men to seek understanding, you know, in their identity as a black man and possible ways that they can enhance their sense, you know, their sense of uniqueness.
Yes, thank you for that. Absolutely, Frank.
Ali, it's great to hear you on there. It's a surprise, but I recognize your voice immediately. As far as that uniqueness, Ali, as I would often say, the greatest challenge that we have as humans is to understand and know ourselves. If you look at some of the earliest writings on the walls in the Temple of Adelphi, there was written on there the most profound words, "Know thyself." And there's a reason for that.
Yes.
Most people wind up focusing on the group instead of themselves. You'll find truth inside yourself. And once you find that truth, you can basically dance within your own truth. And if you dance so graciously, everybody will look at you and say, "Hey, what did I miss out on? Let me do his dance."
And Ali, I think that was such a profound question. Even in church today, our pastor was talking about understanding, and that's just a running theme now, that we have to get some understanding, because if you don't know who you are, then it's hard for you to really kind of understand what's happening around you and why you're here on this earth and what purpose do you serve. So that I just love that question, especially for our black men. And I believe that there were a group of young men in here right before the show started, and my husband was talking with them and talking to them. They would say they were rappers or whatever they do. And he said, well, you all know you need to be unique. You need to be unique and be yourself in terms of when you want to go into that game and as you matriculate through this world. So we know that we're having the right conversation just by you calling in, confirming with that question.
A lot of people, they spend so much time trying to know somebody else. And fail to take the time to get to know themselves. So
yes,
that resonated with me.
Well, thank you so much, Ali, for calling in. Hope you can continue to tune into the show.
No problem. My pleasure.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about Frank. I know you all are sitting on the edge of your seats like, who is this gentleman? What does he bring to the table? Well, I'm just going to say fencing, billiards, a chef, a poet, an interior designer, an Army officer, veteran. He was even the press secretary for Congresswoman Maxine Waters and spokesperson for General Tommy R. Franks. This is the talent that we're talking about. So, Frank, how do you find time to do it all? How did you tell us how you got into fencing first? Because I just think that's just phenomenal.
Well, growing up in Harlem, as I mentioned, I lived in my grandfather was the matriarch of the patriarch of the family, and he had two daughters. My mother was his favorite daughter, and
I know something about being a favorite.
And we lived together. So my cousins lived with me. We had three boys on their side, and a little girl. And there was two twin boys. I had two twin sisters and two other sisters. So I had four sisters. So it kind of mixed around. My grandfather was on a ship. He was born in 1891 in Trinidad. Him and his cousin stowawayed on a boat, a Dutch ship, the Chicken Bang, that was based out of Indonesia. And because of that, he spoke three languages. He spoke Spanish, he spoke German, and he spoke English. But what was remarkable, he landed, that ship got commissioned by the U.S. Navy, and he was able to, when he docked in San Francisco in 1920, he came on over. He brought with him this interesting savoir-faire type of
art
vibe.
form.
Right. His cousin,
Yes.
Preston was a noted bachelor, but both of them were fencers.
Wow.
So they brought to Harlem the art of fencing. He'd been all over the world. That's all he's ever done. And I remember vividly his sabers that would be in the trunk at the foot of his bed. And he used to, lovingly call me. I was like the little smart guy, and they called me Poopaloo. That was my little nickname. Poopaloo.
You got to love those nicknames in our community.
So when you're out here and you're trying to find yourself, you have to recognize that a tree without roots,
My goodness,
is not strong.
Right.
That's right.
So I had to do some research, with the help of some of my nieces. We did research, and we found out all of this information that we did have some history, and fencing was part of that history. So I sought to go out and engage myself in some fencing. I haven't gotten any further with it yet because I have so many different things that I like to do. As a matter of fact, I went to the gym the other day, and they had some Filipino fighting skills that they teach on Saturdays. I may go ahead and take that. You never know.
Well, I want to switch from fencing and ask you about interior design.
Yes.
Because my daughter is currently in school now, getting a degree in interior design. So can you tell me about what attracted you to that and how you went about making a career out of it?
Well, it's more of an avocation.
Yeah.
More of an avocation.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I probably all stem from being in the barracks. making sure everything was organized and then it developed. I remember being an executive officer in the infantry, and I would make sure that my commander's tent was the most comfortable. I would put sea ration crates on the bottom so he had the comfort. I'd make sure he had the white lining in there and the lights in there, so it had a certain kind of ambiance. And I kind of developed over time, and I started to understand the rule of threes and how to interject colors that kind of speak to that passion. I like to, when I design something, you'll understand that you can feel something.
Right.
With colors.
Yes.
Certain colors
Yes.
feel a certain way.
Yes, they
you don't
do.
want too much powerful colors because it jars your sensibility. So I learned to balance things. I learned to balance the art with the furniture so that nothing overpowers anything.
Okay.
When you come in there, you feel a sense of ease because there's no competition. You don't crowd the space because the eye can only focus on one thing. So I learned how to use lighting to direct the eye. I learned how to use art for placement. Learned how to use different kinds of furnishings to set a particular mood that I want.
And so we talked about fencing, we talked about interior design, but those that follow Frank on Facebook, we already know about the food.
Yes.
The meals are just absolutely incredible. And what you see is what you get. This gentleman has so much passion, and you can tell that my husband always talks about serve the food with love, but he serves not only with love, but it's decorated, it's proportioned, and so we're going to ask our engineer to show some of the pictures, but how did you get into food?
Well, food came out of as I said, when adversity meets necessity, you create passion.
Yes.
I remember the first time I went over to Korea in 1988, 89, and some of the brothers, we had our little kitchenettes.
Right.
And each brother had a certain skill. One brother knew how to do Cornish hens.
Look at that food.
Another one knew how to do steak. And so you learn how to cook a little bit. So when I got back to the States, I was a new divorcee. That adversity.
necessity. And then came
your passion. Yes.
So, if you notice, there's always, in everything that I do, there's a certain balance that's undergirded by everything. The interior design that matches with the cooking, that matches with, if you notice, the dressing. That has a rule.
Yeah,
it's the rule of threes operating right here.
I know about the dressing rule of three.
I got polka dots, and then I have a solid.
That's right.
That's right.
You know what I mean? You don't want to mix that up. So everything kind of, there's nothing that I do that doesn't fit in within that harmony.
Okay.
So
And so I'm sorry to
go ahead.
interrupt you, but what was the name of your I don't know, your brand for cuisine?
For cooking, it
Yes.
was the Romantic Cuisinier.
Romantic Cuisine. You
Yeah.
all heard it here.
Right.
And the cuisinier is a French name for a male chef.
Oh, okay. You learned something new. So it's food, poetry.
Yes. I'm a retired businessman as well, so I'm in my retirement.
I want to be you right
I know.
now.
I know.
Right now.
Yeah.
So I always have business ideas. So what I thought about throughout the time that I was growing, a lot of my female friends would often say, Frank, you need to teach some of these men how to be romantic. So I said, man, let me come up with a nice little concept. And the Romantic Cuisinier kind of was born out of that. What I had envisioned was I'm going to have kind of like a romantic concierge service.
Right. Yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
My lady's a singer. She's a retired singer,
Yes.
so she does a lot of wedding bands, corporate singers. And they cater to a certain clientele. And she has one of her friends who has her own agency, and she offered me, he said, look, Frank, we can get you out here and charge $8,000 a pop.
Oh, wow.
With some of my clientele. And I said, well, this is what I do for my hobby.
Yeah.
I could teach being romantic.
There's something about being a professional.
Yes.
And you got to
Yes.
give them their
Yes.
credit.
Right.
There's a lot of things that they learn. As a matter of fact, I'm taking some cooking classes now. And because I already have a basis the creative basis, it's a lot easier for me. I learned the different techniques of the mirepoix and how to make the soups and how to do cutting skills.
I don't want that part,
that.
Frank. You can have all that to yourself. The whole cooking part, you can have that.
But see, even in that, just like pool and fencing, there's a basic fundamental that you learn.
Yes.
And from there, you can dance. It's like music. It's like the jazz artists. They learn the basic foundations of music, la, 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 la. And then after a while, they get in it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, there's some rhythm. You know, brother's got to find his rhythm now. You know?
I'm with you on that. Don't make me get up out this chair.
Catholic school can't take that from me. You know?
Yes. And so talk to us in our audience about your poetry.
Oh, well.
Yes. And for those that don't know, I don't know if you remember this, Sherelle. I think it was last year you donated some books to my conference to give away as giveaways for the ladies that were there. And so this is, if you all are holding his books, these are the books. They came from this gentleman, Frank.
Words and thoughts.
Words and thoughts.
But you have to know how to read.
Interestingly enough, I didn't realize this, but I met two young men who were in the military with me the first time.
Yes.
I went through and both of those guys were retired New York City police officers, and they invited me down to Florida and doing very well. One of the guys shared with me how much I helped them out because I was so hurt by that. I didn't want anybody else to be affected by that,
right.
So I kind of defended. He said, "Frank, you know, man, you carry this book around with all these writings and poetry. You still do that stuff?" And it never dawned on me. I lost the majority of that stuff. But when you go through the trauma of that, it's cerebral. It forces you to always look inward. And sometimes you want to articulate that, you know. And it gave me that ability to see things a little differently, you know, to understand people a little differently. And it just motivated me. And one day, a friend of mine mentioned, "Hey, you ever write any haikus?" I said, "No, I never have. What is that?" So I looked it up, studied it a little bit, and wrote about 10 of them, you know. Well, okay, this is okay.
Can you explain to our audience what a haiku is?
Yes, a haiku is a Japanese form of poetry that consists of a very balanced verse. It has to have 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, and 5 syllables in the last line. If you look at on the screen, gentrification. I went to Harlem, and I was kind of surprised that the place that I remember, 117th Street, if you remember American Gangster, that was that particular area.
Yes.
And I noticed that I went there and I asked a lady that I saw walking a dog, and I said, "Could you tell me where Minton's Playhouse, which is a jazz place?" And she spoke with a perfect British accent. "It's right up the block over there." And I said, "You're from Britain?" She said, "No, I live here." And I said, "Oh my." You know? So if you look at that form, where has Harlem gone? She traded soul for new clothes and lost her meaning.
And hold that thought for 1 second. Let's take this caller. Hello, caller. Can you turn your radio down, please? Welcome to Sisters in Company. Caller. Okay, well.
If you stay ready, you don't have to get
we'll
ready.
Have to come back because we only have like a few more minutes left. And so I didn't mean to interrupt you. You want to finish that thought?
Yes. So basically, that's where that particular form of poetry came from. And I also do freestyle. I'm in the process of writing my memoirs called Heart of a Warrior.
Yes.
I like that title.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have so many people on the show today, and now you know why we had Mr. Frank Phillips on the show. It's about God has already predestined us to do the things that we're doing, and Frank is a living testimony, just like so many other people, about, you know, living the life to the fullest and tapping into all of the gifts and talents that you may have and not being afraid to try different things. You talked about this knife wielding thing. I don't know about that, but
right.
You know, you may even consider doing that,
dangerous.
but just really trying to, you know, make a difference, continue to learn, because as long as we're here, we have to continue to learn and try to make a difference.
Absolutely.
I will tell you this in kind of closing out what I was saying is that I retired from teaching. And the situation that came, it was a little different situation. And as I said, out of adversity comes passion. And it worked out real well for me. But it left me without a passion. I love teaching students. I did that great. But I still have my mentees out there that I deal with.
Right.
And so for a while, I kind of wrestled around there. And one of my pool coaches is kind of the traditions of the John Coltrane's, but he was in pool. He was a one-pocket hustler. One of the rare people of the day. This guy is great. You would think he was a bus driver, but probably one of the most magnanimous men I've ever met in my life. I mean, I put him on the level of some of the generals and people that I've made contact with. And he would often tell me, he said, "Frank, man, you're a lucky guy, man. You got all these talents. You over there cooking that butternut squash."
That's right.
You know, I never really embraced it, but probably within the last 6 months, it dawned on me, man, I got a lot of stuff that I could be doing, and I have the wherewithal to do it.
That's it.
So let me do this. And
Yes.
a brother saw me at the pool hall, right? And I was over there explaining my stuff. He says, "Frank, man," he said, "man, you don't let any grass grow under your feet, do you?" I said, "Brother, when the good Lord decides to pull me out this thing, I'm going to be fighting because I'm going to be busy."
And that's a great way to kind of end the show, but
Yes.
I would be remiss. My goodness, my husband's sitting over there looking at me like, you have got to say that Frank is a man of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity
Yes, say it.
Incorporated. And silly me.
Yes.
Frank just has so
She
much
done
going
ruined the
on.
whole
I
show with
know.
that.
But Frank, thank you so
Yes, thank
much.
you.
And so if people want to follow you, they can just follow you on Facebook.
Yes,
At
yes,
Frank Phillips.
yes.
Yes. So thank you all. Of course, you know the time goes by so fast. We hope you enjoyed the show. And if you have any gifts and talents you're sitting on, just get up and just do it.
And don't forget, you can find all of our shows, Sisters in Company, on YouTube. Just search Sisters in Company, and you can catch up on all the ones you may have missed.
I do plan on putting some of my cooking on video.
Okay, that's fine. And so we'll make sure that we
Okay.
promote that with you. All right,
All right,
everyone.
well, thank
thank
you
you. This has been a wonderful show. Bless you.
We
Have a-
will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3:00 p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?